Okay, we're going to start the meeting. We have started the recording, which is great. Again, my name is Andrew Bing. I will be facilitating and leading this working group meeting for phase 2. This is our 11th meeting of the working group. And I'd like to welcome everyone and thank everyone for joining us. And as always, thank the members of the public who have taken the time to join us as well. Many of you have heard me say this. I will say it one more time. This is a meeting that is organized and designed for the working group members. However, it is open to the public, and we welcome the public and love having the public join us. The interaction, the questions, the discussion will take place between the project team and the working group. We do save time at the end of the meeting for any member of the public who'd like to make a comment, a brief comment. They certainly can. If you are a member of the public and would like to do that, simply open up the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and just type in your name and just say, I'd like to make a public comment. And at that point, at the end of the meeting, we will go in the order in which we receive that. So I'm going to move us along to our first slide. So this is our agenda. We will do a couple quick introductions for some new working group members, as well as a new Dell representative who I think Pam Steinbach, many of you know, and I think she may have introduced herself once before, but we're going to have her introduce herself again. We're going to do a roundabout refresher. There's a lot of new roundabouts coming online, and as we've often done, we like to do some presentations about areas of interest or areas that we think are important or areas we want you all to be in a position to be able to share information with your constituents. So we'll do that. We will do a presentation on one of our recommendations, which is a discussion on trees in the right-of-way. As always, we will go through our phase 2 implementation status. And then, as I said, we will do public comment. So we'll go to the next slide. So again, as I mentioned to the members of the public, everyone who is appearing as an attendee, a member of the public, you are on mute and you do not have the ability to unmute yourself. We will have to unmute you at the point where you would make a public comment. But for the working group members, we do ask that we obviously want to have discussion. That's an important part of this process. We do ask that you just click on the raise the hand at the bottom. I will see that and I will come to you. If for some reason I'm not seeing it or I'm not coming to you, obviously you can always politely interrupt the discussion and ask your question. If you are on by phone and you need to raise your hand, and I don't think we have anyone on by phone right now, but you press the *9 button to raise your hand, and that way I would know, and then you would hit the *6 button to unmute yourself. But again, we'll get to that if we need to bring you on. *9 to raise your hand. We do ask that all the working group members stay on mute and until you come on to talk, just to limit interference and any disruptions. So in terms of our introductions, like I said, we did have a couple new members who joined us. Kathy Coleman has joined us from 5 Points, the Village at 5 Points HOA. She replaces Carol Core. And Mary Roth is joining us representing the Historic Lewis Byways. She is replacing Gail Van Gilder, who has been with us since the very beginning. I know Mary is on. I don't know if I looked right before I started talking to see if Kathy had joined us, but I do want to welcome you. You're joining a great group. Please do not be afraid to speak up and join the discussion. And we're certainly glad you're a part of this group. I do also want to welcome and introduce Pam Steinbach, who is the new Dell working group member. She's also the new Director of Planning. Pam, did you want to come in and just say a quick hello?
Sure. Andrew, thank you so much. Can you hear me?
You're good. We can see you and hear you.
Okay. I think that's the tagline for the year 2020. Can you hear me? Yes, thank you so much for that kind introduction. I'm very excited to be a part of this 5 Points working group. Just a FYI to know me, a bit more. I've been with the Delaware Department of Transportation for 18 years now. I worked in project development, performance management, maintenance, and now 5 months as the director of planning. So I'm very excited to work with this team and to give any input and help along the way. So thank you so much.
Great, thanks, Pam. So as you can see on our slide right here, we did send everyone all the notebook materials, the agenda, the presentation, draft minutes of our last meeting, the October 25th meeting, a list of upcoming meetings, and then the all-important updated implementation plan. So hopefully you all have that. That can be there as a reference throughout this meeting if you need anything, or if you want to bring up anything. So what I'm going to do now, and I'll give you a little advance notice, this is the one time where I do ask that all of the working group members come off of mute. But we are going to seek approval of our October 25th, 2021 meeting minutes, which were sent out in advance of this meeting. So I would love it if someone could come on and make a motion, and then we get a second.
Andrew, this is Ernie Lopez. I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes. Thank you.
Great. Is there a second?
This is Kim Hoy Stevenson. Pete got me. Never mind.
You know what, Kim? I'm going to give it to you. You stayed on longer than Pete. Pete gave up too soon. I'll recognize you as seconding that motion. Are there any discussion? Anyone have any questions or comments about the minutes? Any issues with them?
No.
Okay. Great. Well, we're just going to do this. If all in favor, if you could say yay.
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 Yay. Yes.
Yay.
Yay.
Great. Anyone opposed? Okay. Anyone abstaining? All right. Well, those meeting minutes have now been approved and will be part of our officially part of our project record.
Andrew.
So we are. Yes, go ahead, Jen.
Hi, it's Jen. I apologize. So before we get any further, there's somebody that is on, but they're listed as my computer, and I have a feeling that it's Mike. And Mike, if it is you, could you please raise your hand to let us know that you?
Mike.
From Bike Delaware. My apologies. My email is dropped down.
So I didn't understand. So you're not.
I think one of our working group members is listed under a generic my computer. So I'm just trying to verify if that is him.
So if any of our working group members are not on by name or in Mike Tyler, we're not sure if you're coming through. So Mike, if you could raise your hand just so we can recognize that's you.
And then Carol Metzernick, I am trying to promote you. So she's not being able to get promoted either.
Okay.
Oh, she went through. Okay, great.
All right.
Okay.
So Jen, so is Mike listed as an attendee and he's showing up?
So somebody came in and it unlisted their name, my computer. Sometimes that happens with Mike Tyler's computer. So I was just making sure that wasn't him. They've not raised their hand, so that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. All right, great. Okay, we will move forward then. So again, if feel free, we really would prefer that the working group members come online to ask any questions or have a discussion. If there's something that you wanted to put in the Q&A box at the bottom, you certainly could do that. But we kind of like the interaction. So we're going to move on to our discussion. I'm going to introduce Leah, who is our new consultant project manager. She's also going to introduce herself, but we're going to do a presentation on Delaware roundabouts. As I mentioned, during phase 2, we've taken the opportunity at various times to do presentations on various areas of what we think would be of interest to both the working group members and the general public. With roundabouts becoming ever more prominent and with a few more coming online soon, we thought this was a good time to discuss this. Some of this information you may think to yourself is pretty obvious. Others maybe something new that you didn't know. But at any rate, we thought it would be helpful. So I'm going to bring on Leah. Kikanda to introduce herself, introduce the new consultant team, some of the new consultant team members, and lead us through this presentation. Leah?
Thank you, Andrew. My name is Leah. I am a planner with Whitman Ruckhart & Associates, and I am joined tonight with some other folks from the WRA team. I am stepping in for Jeff. I know you've had many good times with him over the years, but along with me tonight from WRA is Mike Campbell, who you'll be hearing from in a little bit regarding trees in the right-of-way, and also Todd Oliver, who many of you know from numerous projects in the 5 Points area. So just wanted to let you know they're also with us tonight, as well as Adrian East, who you all are familiar with from past 5 Points work. So roundabouts. Obviously, a roundabout is a circular intersection that moves traffic around that central island. One of the benefits of a roundabout is that it slows traffic down, and we'll get into that a little bit more momentarily. It also eliminates direct left turns, which are a major cause of intersection crashes and is a proven FHWA safety measure. You'll see there on screen, there is a blue link. In your meeting packets, you should be able to directly click on that link and any other links you see in the presentation to learn more. Just keep that in mind. So why are roundabouts safer? There's 2 diagrams on the screen here that show a couple different things. So in black, the black lines represent the path that vehicles travel through an intersection. As well, between those 4 blue triangles, the path that people follow when they are crossing the road. And at the intersection of all those lines, you see 2 different colors. You see red dots and black squares. And those are all of the different conflict points. So, you know, a car can turn left, go straight, or turn right, which intersects with the path of all the other moving vehicles and all the people crossing the street, which actually results in a pretty astonishing number of conflict points, 32 for vehicles and 24 for people walking across the street. Now, when you compare that to the diagram of a roundabout on the right, because cars can only move to the right around the center of the roundabout, those conflict points are reduced drastically because cars are not crossing each other's paths. So there are actually only 8 vehicle conflict points and 8 pedestrian conflict points. And that, of course, has some pretty significant safety benefits, as shown in the statistics on the right-hand side. So when a traditional 2-way stop-controlled intersection is converted to a roundabout, there's actually an 82% reduction in fatal crashes and high injury crashes, and a 78% reduction from a signalized intersection to a roundabout. So it's pretty clear documented evidence collected from across the country by FHWA on why these intersections are safer. And in addition to the safety benefits, they also keep traffic moving, because frequently, you know, there aren't other cars in the roundabout and you can just keep moving on through. The channelized approaches created by those islands and the pavement markings direct traffic into that one-way counterclockwise flow. It's pretty clear where you're supposed to be moving. And as a moving vehicle, you just yield to traffic that's already in the circle. And of course, yield for people walking and biking across those crosswalks. And as we said earlier, that the geometry, the shape of the roundabout, and that radius that's set really slows people down. So as they enter, they can keep moving, but they're also traveling at a reasonable rate of speed. And that's another part of the reason crashes are much less severe than traditional intersections when people can move through at high rates of speed. So here's kind of a graphic showing everything we just talked about there. So you see those gray kind of channelized intersections where people, and then where people cross, the yield signs on each approach, and also that central island. And you'll see there's kind of the green, and then around that central island, also a gray section, and that's for what's called a truck apron, which means if there is a larger vehicle that needs to pass through, oftentimes people think, oh, a big tractor trailer can't travel through a roundabout, but they actually can, because that truck apron, a car wouldn't drive on because it's a little bit curbed, but a bigger vehicle can use that space to traverse a roundabout. So what is the difference between a modern roundabout and an older traffic circle? They're actually pretty significantly different. So an older style traffic circle is much larger. If you think about the, in Georgetown, downtown, that's an older traffic rotary. It's a very big space. And that doesn't have some of the same benefits that we've just been talking about. It doesn't keep speeds as low because it's much bigger, and it's also harder for cars to see people entering and leaving and keep track of things. So the new modern roundabout is substantially better. And some of those differences can be shown, are shown here on screen. So on the right-hand side there, you see a image of a traffic circle. And often those can be stop controlled instead of that yield. It's also a much more extreme angle when vehicles are entering that roundabout. And in some places, fortunately not here at the Georgetown example, but weaving can actually be permitted. So you can kind of change lanes moving around it, but that is not what we're talking about when we talk about roundabouts. And those are not as effective as the modern roundabout design we shared.
Leah, Kim has a question. Kim?
Yes.
Actually, I probably raised my hand too soon. You might be about to answer that question. I was just curious why there weren't more merge lanes on the circles, so that if somebody's pulling off, you have time to pull in, and then, but you were just saying you don't want people weaving in the circle. So
yeah, so usually most of the roundabouts we have in Sussex County right now are what are called single lane roundabouts. So as you can see on the left there, it's just one lane of traffic. So it's just a normal yield condition there, as opposed to multiple lanes, which there are multi-lane roundabouts. We do not have any in Sussex County at this time. They would be for larger, more volumes and bigger intersections, but they're slightly different. So that's why we don't need a merge lane. Does anyone else from the project team want to speak to that a little bit more eloquently than I just did?
I was just I was just curious about one. Well, people in the United States don't seem to have any training in a roundabout. I guess that'll change. But I've seen how backed up traffic gets in Georgetown. So that's what my concern was with the new ones that we're putting in. I didn't want to be creating bottlenecks. So this eliminates this.
Yes. So basically the roundabouts are actually analyzed in accordance with the existing and projected traffic volumes for that particular location or condition to ensure that circulation will continue without the queuing that you might experience today at Georgetown.
Go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, I just want to say that the first slide, or first pictures you put up there with all the pinch points and the conflict points, we should have that blown up and put on billboards or something, because that right there, you don't have to say anything to explain these things. If this is the first I've seen this. And by the way, Andrew, I did not get my material, so I don't have everything to look at. But I think this is really impressive how this is laid out here for the public to understand just what we're doing with these roundabouts. I've been a big supporter of the roundabouts ever since they were proposed back, I don't know, 12, 14 years ago on Old Landing Road. But when you look at that, I don't see how you can argue that point against the roundabout.
So I see we have, as I thought might happen once we started talking, we've got a bunch of people looking to get involved. If there's kind of a point that you don't understand or something critical right now, but I do want to try to get through the presentation and then have this discussion at the end. But Mike Tyler, I'll recognize you first. You got to unmute yourself, Mike. We're not hearing you. Okay, I'm not hearing you, Mike. So Bob, why don't you come in and we'll try Mike in a second. Bob, just quickly, if you have something you want to add.
Yes, I want to pick up on what Speaker Schwarzkopf said. And in fact, specifically on the next door social platform that services like almost 3,000 families in the 5 Points area, there was a very extended, mostly negative discussion of roundabouts. And I tried to deflect as much of the criticism as I could and direct people to the Dell.dot website. But I would hope whoever is in interfaces from this working group with Dell.dot's community outreach, I would suggest that this briefing, as Speaker Schwarzkopf suggested, a link to this briefing on the Dell.dot website be posted specifically by the liaison to the next door social group. And I think, Jennifer, you know what I'm talking about, right?
So that's, again, this is why we want to go through this presentation, kind of hear this feedback from the working group members. So Mike Tyler, are you able to come on, or can, if not, we're going to move forward. Okay, I'm still not hearing Michael. So Leah, why don't you continue? I appreciate the positive responses to the first few slides. Why don't we hold off on questions again, unless there's a point that someone doesn't understand, and then let's come back at the end of Leah's presentation and have a discussion where everyone can kind of chime in. Go ahead, Leah.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, so, in further support of folks who get maybe confused or otherwise when using a roundabout, Delta does have some very great and useful guidance on the website right now for how to use a roundabout for all modes. So we'll start with cars, which is pretty straightforward. And I imagine it seems like most of you are pretty familiar with this, but again, very user-friendly instructions for those of your neighbors who maybe are not as comfortable, which is to slow down when you're approaching that roundabout, stay to the right. Keep an eye out for people walking and biking. Make sure you yield if there's already traffic moving around the circle. And then once you're in the roundabout, don't stop unless you're stopping to avoid a collision. Continue traveling in that counterclockwise direction. Do not pass. There should not be room in that roundabout to pass, so that shouldn't be too big of an issue. And just continue following the roundabout until you exit. And we have another diagram to kind of support this. So you can see here in the blue arrow, if you're making a right-hand turn, it's pretty straightforward. You enter the circle and depart it at your first right. The green arrow shows how through traffic behaves, which is to just move around that circle and continue straight. And one thing that I think is actually really convenient with roundabouts, especially if I'm traveling in a place I haven't been or get turned around, is that it's pretty easy to make a U-turn or a left turn. So pretty similar behavior. Travel 3/4 of the way around or all the way around when you're traveling through. So I think one thing we can all agree is that some of us learn better looking at these diagrams and some of us like the written out version. So we'll make an effort to include both forms in future communications, both with the public and others. So now if you're riding a bike, you kind of have two options. For safety reasons, you can't have a traditional in-road bike lane in a roundabout. I think it's pretty obvious if you think through that. It would be a lot of conflict points between people driving a car and biking. But cyclists do have two options. But we do want to reiterate, part of the reason why roundabouts are better for cars is also a reason they're good for people walking and biking, because that slow speed means that non-motorized users are also much safer because cars are more likely to yield. They don't have to stop as quickly or as severely because they're already traveling a little bit slower. When they do have to stop, their stopping distance is shorter and lower risk of collision. And then if there is a collision, there's a much less great chance that collision is going to be severe because speeds are lower. So a bike has three options. They can, as you see in the upper right there, ride like a car with traffic, and that's going to be an option, as I'm sure Mike Tyler knows, for your more serious avid cyclist who's comfortable riding and sharing the lane. They can kind of join the lane, travel around, and again, because speeds are pretty slow, that's comfortable. Now, if cyclists are a little bit less comfortable, they can dismount their bike and travel through the roundabout like a pedestrian would, using sidewalks and crosswalks. And alternately, especially in the beach area, there may be a shared use path available. And in that instance, the bike would behave much the same as a pedestrian because that pathway would also be using crosswalks. So on this slide, we kind of have a diagram showing those different behaviors. So in the lower right in red, you can see that bike behavior. So one bike there is kind of joining the road with traffic and the other one is using the sidewalk to move through. And then for pedestrians, you see in that blue figure in the blue line, just using a crosswalk, sidewalk to crosswalk again to travel through that intersection. One thing to remember, if you're walking or biking, is never cross into the center island. You can imagine how it's pretty easy for someone to just get stuck in there without an easy or safe way out. Also, for people using those crosswalks, it's important to, look towards approaching traffic when entering the roundabout and then departing traffic when crossing the exit lanes. One benefit of roundabouts also is the splitter islands that help divert motor vehicles also can provide a pedestrian refuge. So that's a little bit of extra space to catch your breath and look the other direction when crossing. Pedestrians, as always, whether they're crossing near a roundabout or just at a normal mid-block crossing or other signalized intersection, should only cross when it's safe. Make sure that drivers can see you when you're crossing or wait for that adequate gap in traffic. And on the bottom there, you can see, and this kind of speaks to what was raised earlier, which is when there is a multi-lane roundabout, that is a little bit trickier for pedestrians. People crossing have to make sure that both lanes of traffic are clear before they make that crossing movement. So, as Andrew alluded to earlier, and I'm sure many of you know, given all of your—
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I will forget it if I don't ask. On those crosswalks, this is Bob. If somebody's in the crosswalk, obviously they'd have the right of way, but technically, does traffic, I mean, as soon as a pedestrian's in the crosswalk, that means that traffic's going to have to stop for a pedestrian's in the crosswalk. Does that still apply on these?
Yeah, it's the same rule for crosswalks that apply to any crosswalk in the state. You know, pedestrian has the right of way.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Keep going, Leah.
Okay, I saw you come on, Andrew. I was waiting for you to say something.
Nope, I was just
Right.
checking in with Bob.
Very good. So, more roundabouts are coming. So we know Beaver Dam Road came in October this past year, and I'm sure that has spawned a lot of the dialogue you've all been seeing on social media and maybe with your neighbors in person. But we also have a couple of other projects coming online soon that will have roundabouts, including Plantation Road, West Coast Road at Marsh Road, and Minos Conaway has 3 roundabouts actually at the locations indicated on the screen. So more to come with those. And just, you know, for all the reasons we already discussed today, for the safety reasons, because of the improved traffic flow, roundabouts are the preferred intersection improvement considered across the country, not just in Delaware. And it's because they are safer. They're safer than traffic signals and stop signs. And in addition to that safety benefit, they also improve that traffic flow and are better for the environment. That being said, as Todd said earlier, they are considered on a case-by-case basis. So this isn't just, you know, intersections changing, we're putting a roundabout there. It does depend on that analysis of current traffic volumes and flows, as well as how much right-of-way is available, the environmental impact, and drainage and utility impacts. More information on roundabouts are available on the Dell website. As Bob, I think you mentioned earlier, and you were directing some of your neighbors to that site, there's a roundabout location map that's interactive, as well as more information about how to use roundabouts for different modes of travel. Thank you. Andrew?
Great, Leah, thank you. That was great. And we'll now open it up to working group question and comments. Before, again, just raise your hand. Hopefully, Mike Tyler, we've got your audio now. But before we do that, I was going to have Shantae come on just to respond to a point we got through the Q&A. Just seemed like a worthwhile time for her to come on and say a quick hi and respond to that question. So,
hi, everyone. Shantae
hi.
Hastings, Executive Secretary for Dell. So the question that we received in the Q&A is, why is the new roundabout at New Road and Lynn Road have a posted speed limit of 15 miles per hour? It is not needed. And also the private roundabout in Village of 5 Points has stop signs up. That defeats the purpose. So in terms of the 15 miles per hour at the New Road, new roundabout, the 15 miles per hour is likely an advisory speed limit. So those are the yellow placards with black text. So that's not regulatory, like a speed limit sign. That's a white placard with black text. So it's just an advisory speed. I know most of the roundabouts that I go through, I'm slowing down to below 25 miles per hour, definitely. And in some cases, I am going 15 or even 10, depending on the curvature within. So it's an advisory speed limit. Again, roundabouts are intended to slow down traffic for several different reasons. And so that's why you see the 15 miles per hour there. In terms of the Village of 5 Points internal street network, those are private roads, so they are not regulated or maintained by the department. So we would agree that stop signs don't make a lot of sense in roundabouts. We actually want traffic to keep flowing in a kind of slow moving fashion. So we would agree that stop signs aren't necessary, but we don't have any control over those roads or any say in how they're signed.
Great. Thanks, Shantae. And again, Mike Tyler, I'm sorry. Apparently your audio is not working. If you do, you can feel free to type something in the Q&A and we can read it. But sorry about that. Anyone else from the working group who hasn't yet had a chance to engage in this discussion, or any comments, questions, anything from any of the working group members? Okay, well, I think we must have gotten them all during the discussion, so that's good. Again, Leah, thank you for that presentation.
Hey, Andrew, I just had a couple minor things to add.
Go ahead, Todd.
Maybe for clarification on a few things. So from a roadway design standpoint, the entry speed for a roundabout is typically designed at 15 to 20 miles per hour. So when we look at the roadway cross slope and drainage and things that would affect how the vehicle reacts at different speeds, that's what we assume. And that's typically what most of the design guidelines provide. So that's probably where that 15 mile per hour advisory speed would come from. And one other point I'd like to make, kind of following up to what Leah stated about bicyclists using the roundabout. For most of our roundabouts, especially the newer design ones, we have an advanced exit ramp for bikes to use that are clearly marked in advance of the roundabout, so that they can make that decision to exit the roundabout well in advance, so they're not stuck in a dilemma zone. In most cases, the newer roundabouts that are proposed, especially in Sussex County, are surrounded by 10-foot shared use paths instead of a typical 5-foot sidewalk, which will also help minimize those conflict points between cyclists and pedestrians when the cyclist chooses to leave the roadway before entering the roundabout. So just wanted to follow up on a couple of those items.
Great.
And
thanks for adding
Andrew,
to the discussion.
Pam, sorry,
Yeah, go ahead, Pam.
I just wanted to add one more thing, like Todd had said. I know Leah had mentioned the tractor trailers, but we also in high farm areas, we do take into account large farm vehicles like combines and what there's many other farm vehicles that I don't know the names of, but we do try to take into account that to like set the signs back on the truck apron and stuff as well. So
great.
Just a note.
Okay, we're going to move on. I don't see any other hands raised, but again, one of the roles that this working group plays is to not only attend meetings, not only engage in discussion and ask questions, but to share this information, to make people aware of it. You don't have to certainly provide the presentation, but it's the kind of thing that if you're out there talking to someone, you can point them to this presentation on the website, let people know about it. And Speaker Schwarzkopf, in terms of your point of publicizing it, that's certainly some of the images, something that we can discuss and look into. So what we're going to do now is we're going to shift to our next discussion, which is trees within the right-of-way. I'm looking off on my other screen here while I read something, but this is a slightly different presentation in that this is a presentation in response to one of our recommendations from phase one, which was recommendation B14, which was a recommendation to identify locations where trees can safely be planted within the right-of-way. So this was a recommendation that was, I guess I misspoke, this was initiated in 2021. DelDOT's going to need working group input to move this recommendation forward. So it doesn't all have to come tonight, but we are looking for that input. Mike Campbell is going to provide this presentation tonight and going to provide background to the working group on guidelines that might apply, that need to apply to trees in the right-of-way. So that's kind of the purpose of this presentation, is both to inform, educate, but also engage in a discussion with the working group and get some feedback and input. So I'm going to bring Mike Campbell on, who's going to lead us through that presentation. Again, my preference is that people wait until the end of the presentation, but I also know that there are times where something is really salient to the slide. And if that's the case, raise your hand and I'll bring you on and we can have that question then. So Mike, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, I'm happy to provide a brief overview of the process and framework of when trees and landscape is provided within the public right-of-way. First, I'll walk you through when landscaping is placed within the right-of-way. Then we'll talk a little bit about where landscaping is usually permitted within the right-of-way, the types of landscape that are permitted, and lastly, who's responsible for maintenance. So there are two main reasons DelDOT would include plantings on a typical project within the public right-of-way. The first is when it's required by law. The Landscaping and Reforestation Act requires that DelDOT provide reforestation for impacts to existing forests. The quantity and placement of reforestation is usually dictated by the threshold of impacts. The second reason DelDOT may consider including landscaping is when the community requests it. They may request landscaping for aesthetic purposes, or possibly for visual screening, or to reduce noise pollution from an adjacent roadway. The requirements or desire for landscaping starts early in the planning process. As a project goes through the planning process, we consider mitigation of forest impacts, and the desire for plantings may be brought about during the public engagement process, similar to what we are doing here with the 5 points planning process. Internally, DelDOT planning will coordinate with the local DelDOT maintenance district and concurrently with DelDOT's roadside environmental coordinator to discuss the project and any potential maintenance concerns related to the landscape. So now that you've planned for landscape in the right of way, we'll talk a little bit about where can landscaping be placed. Safety is a major factor. Trees are obviously fixed objects and must be carefully placed to not cause a potential hazard. Trees must be set back at intersections to maintain lines of sight to allow for safe movement for both pedestrians, cars, and bicyclists. Lateral offsets are also critical components to the design. The roadway classification, design speeds, and presence of a physical barrier will dictate required offsets for safety. Adjacent land use is also a factor. And whereas street trees or aesthetic stormwater plantings behind the curb may be more appropriate in an urban setting or more desired by the public as well. Trees and utilities are often competing for limited available space within the right of way, both above ground and below ground. We want to make sure that we use the right species that are selected for the project, and that'll reduce future maintenance impacts for both the trees as well as the utility companies. As I mentioned, proper species selection is also critical for the success of the landscape. Things like tolerance to salt spray and wind and sandy soil are some of the environmental aspects to consider, especially specific to Sussex County. Obviously, the department does not want to promote any harmful species, such as an invasive species. And there's currently a draft bill that may require all plantings within the public way to be native species. So we'll provide an update on that as that bill gets developed further. There are some resources available that will help get landscaping within the right-of-way approved faster on a project by following some of the principles outlined in DelDOT's Enhancing Delaware Highways Initiative Guidelines. This is a manual that was developed some time ago, but it is something that DelDOT does follow, and that resource is available online at the link shown on the screen. So lastly, I'd like to stress the importance of maintenance on behalf of the department, which is very limited budget when it comes for maintaining elements within the public right-of-way beyond the pavement itself. A major consideration often overlooked when we talk about maintaining landscape in the right-of-way is the maintenance of traffic requirements to provide a safe place for volunteers or organizations to maintain landscape adjacent to oncoming traffic. DelDOT does have the ability to maintain natural landscape, such as native grasses and flowers and wildflower meadows and forest edge plantings. So I'd like to end with a final word about maintenance. There's no such thing as a no maintenance or low maintenance landscape. Having a signed maintenance agreement with a designated entity in place that can commit to long-term funding will go a long way in getting landscape placed within a public right of way on your projects. I'd like to open that up to questions. If Andrew, you want to come back on?
Yeah. So I do see we just got someone, let's see who that is with their hand raised. Why am I not seeing? Oh, there it is. So Bob Fisher, come on and ask your question.
Yes, I'm wondering if these guidelines are just for future, or are they can be looked at an existing situation, and the specific situation that I'm aware of that used to be dangerous and may still be is where Miller Road runs into Airport. And it was brought to my attention by the firefighters who have to come up there and come up on Miller and at the stop sign there and then turn on Airport. So I don't know if you all are aware of that, and if there are other places where there's existing landscaping that does not meet these guidelines.
Mike, you want to take that, or is there someone else who might be in a better position to respond? I see you coming on.
Well, I would say from an existing condition standpoint, if there were a safety related issue related to any roadside landscaping, the department would certainly consider either trimming or removing that landscaping to ensure that the site triangles that are required are met to ensure that vehicles can navigate the intersection in a safe manner. So if these issues would not be identified through our typical traffic study analysis or a project that's in the capital program, I would imagine that the district maintenance forces could potentially be asked to look at it and make some adjustments accordingly.
Great, thanks, Todd. Anyone else with any thoughts, any input on specific areas or locations where there might be a desire for some trees or some other kind of vegetation in the right of way? I see Mary Roth is welcome again, Mary, to the working group, and come on and make a comment or a question.
Thank you. I appreciate the welcome. Thanks, Andrew. And to Mike Campbell, who made the presentation, I wish we had a time machine and could go back in time about 7 or 8 months. The Historic Lewis Byway Committee has been working with Dell on kind of working through this process and what we needed to better understand for landscape within a number of the projects in the 5 Points area. Specifically, we have just pretty much finished or darn close to coming to an understanding of what we hope will be some landscape in the Roundabout and surrounding landscape for Minos Conaway. We're working to, along with the Tower Hill development on New Road, and also West Coates and Old Orchard, but an understanding of clear zones and setbacks and right-of-way and height and utilities and all that. It has been a challenge. So I can tell you that this information that's been collected here will be very useful for others who want to work on projects. And if there's anything that we can do to sort of inform that process, because it is a challenge. So thanks.
Great. Thanks, Mary.
I'd like to remind everyone too, if you did not notice in your working group packet, there is a one-pager with pretty much all this information included and some more clickable links. So Mary, if you want to send that out to some of your working group members, that might be a good starting point for them.
Great. I do have a follow-up question for Mike Campbell. Mike, when you reference the Landscape and Reforestation Act, are you referring to Delaware's tree bill, or are you referring to something else?
Yes, I am. Actually, that they go hand in hand, both the act and the bill. I think the bill came from the act, if I recall properly, right?
So when trees are removed through a project, then a certain number of trees are required to be placed back into that project.
Correct. And the there's usually a threshold that kicks in once the project has to be actually have a widening or be a new alignment to require the reforestation to kick in. And then there's a certain amount of acreage that is impacted that requires a one-to-one mitigation or an individual tree basis replacement on a one-to-one basis.
Great. Thanks, Mike.
Welcome.
Anyone else with any questions or comments regarding trees in the right-of-way, that discussion that Mike just led us through? Okay, well, then why don't we move on? Why don't we go back a step here? Well, before we do that, let me just make a reminder to members of the public. If there's some kind of general comment that you wish to make, just, again, come through the Q&A, put your name and just say, I'd like to make a comment at the end, and we'll come to you at that point. Right now, we have not received any of that. We have gotten a few questions specific to our presentation topics, and I'm just going to go back to the roundabout discussion. There was a question from Donna West, who are building these roundabouts. The Warrington roundabout is a mess. Lanes are too narrow and inner cement circle is so big. Todd, were you going to come on and maybe just, if not respond directly to that, maybe just provide a little bit of information regarding that?
Sure. Thanks, Andrew. Donna, thank you for your question. First, to answer your first question regarding who are building these roundabouts, essentially, it's probably one of three entities. For any proposed roundabout that's in DelDOT right-of-way, that's part of a capital project, it would be the roadway contractor associated with that project. That roadway contractor may have multiple subcontractors involved, but they are ultimately responsible for that construction. And during that construction, there is constant oversight by DelDOT construction engineering staff to ensure that that roundabout is being built according to the specifications of the plans and what it was designed to. The second would be DelDOT, contracted roundabouts or roadway improvements that were done as part of a development. So for a specific development that reached an agreement with the department to improve an intersection at one of its proposed entrances or an adjacent intersection that will be significantly impacted by the traffic generated from that development, that developer would hire a contractor as part of their development to also install or construct that roundabout. So they may actually be, in some instances, a similar contractor that's familiar with DelDOT work, which I assume most developers would try and do for the purpose of efficiency. But you would also have developer oversight as well as DelDOT construction oversight, inspecting that to ensure that it was constructed accordingly. And then finally, you might have a developer who constructs a roundabout on site on private land, such as the Villages of 5 Points, where there would be some oversight and inspection, but DelDOT would not ultimately have control over how that roundabout is controlled after the construction. So if the developer chooses to install stop signs on private roadways, despite the contradictory effect of traffic circulation, I don't think that DelDOT would be able to control that after the fact. But they do ensure, and they have construction staff that ensures the developments or the developers' contractors are building these according to spec. So if there's a situation, you mentioned the Warrington Road roundabout where lanes are too narrow or the inner cement circle is so big. Regarding the lanes, DelDOT does have guidance that they provide on their website for developers and engineers to ensure that that minimum guidance or those minimum lane widths are provided. Typically, they would range from about 14 to 16 feet wide. So if they are much more narrow than that, then that could be a potential item that we would follow up on or review. Regarding the inner cement circle, I would say in most cases, landscaping is very limited in some of the roundabouts for a number of reasons. One being sight distance within the roundabout to ensure that vehicles can see vehicles entering the roundabout from other locations or approaches. Second, maintenance of the landscaping within the roundabout can be challenging. It's not necessarily a safe location for communities or community programs that would maintain the landscaping to access it on a regular basis, just for the safety of those crossing the roundabout to get to the landscaping. So a lot of times the remaining portion could be planted with grass or low-lying, low-maintenance landscaping, or in this particular instance could be paved, which may give the appearance of a larger cement circle.
Great, thanks, Todd, for that. Very, very helpful. Okay, so anyone else with any questions since we went back to the roundabout? I'm hearing my voice in the background. Mike, is that you? Have you figured out your audio? But maybe can you go on mute, Mike?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Did you have a question?
No, I just had trouble getting online here.
Okay.
I'm here.
Yeah, we can hear you, but if you could go on mute, because I'm getting some feedback from you. I'm hearing myself actually through you. So if you could click
What do you
mute.
want me to do?
Go on mute. There you go. Perfect. Thanks. Okay. Bob, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I thought of another suggestion for Dell Dot and perhaps DMV on these roundabouts. I know DMV provides training material suggestions to organizations like AAA and other people who do training packages. I took one last year to keep my insurance deduction for the training every 3 years. If it's not already in there, since Dell Dot's going to be using more roundabouts, you might that would be a DMV function, but you might put a training package together to offer on how to negotiate roundabouts if one is not already there.
Okay, thanks for that suggestion, Bob. So we're going to move on to our phase 2 implementation plan update. So I'm going to bring Leah back on to go through that. This is a monumental point. No one has ever attempted to do this other than Jeff Rigner, and now Leah is coming on to do it, and we're looking forward to that. So it'll become obvious, but this group, Dell Dot, the county, Sussex County, everyone has played a huge part in all the progress that's been made. A lot of accomplishments in terms of all of the recommendations and projects. So Leah's going to go through that. Again, if you're a member of the public and wish to make a comment, I just need you to put that into the Q&A so that we need that. And again, we'll come back at the end for any questions that anyone has. Go ahead, Leah.
Thank you, Andrew. So in your meeting packets, of course, you have all of the implementation plan updates in the spreadsheet form, which you see on screen there. But for the purposes of our presentation today, we're going to walk through them slide by slide for each of the recommendations with an update from last year. So as you all recall, we had 78 recommendations coming out of phase 1, and we categorized those into 5 different categories. And you'll note each is color coded as indicated on the screen, which matches the color coding in that spreadsheet and will also match the slides you see today. So category A in gray is really recommendations that are to be implemented under current projects or initiatives, and most of those are already underway. Blue are policies and procedures to make the area more efficient, sustainable, and beautiful. Green is really capitalizing and making the most out of existing roadway infrastructure. Red is focused on other modes than driving, so how to make walking, biking, and transit more viable as alternatives. And lastly, things in category E, yellow, are new infrastructure projects. So those are really the long-term recommendations, but we do have some updates in that category as well. So of our 78 recommendations, 55 are in progress, ongoing, or completed. That is one more than what we discussed at our last meeting in October. We have one item in category B that is newly in progress. We'll talk about that in a moment. And 3 recommendations that we've actually completed since our last meeting. One has changed from in progress to ongoing, which basically means instead of actively underway, it's kind of in a slight holding pattern. We'll talk about that momentarily. And good news coming, reflecting on our accomplishments of the last year. All the 7 recommendations that we discussed at our last January meeting to be initiated in 2021 were initiated. So that's great. And we have 4 new recommendations that we will be initiating this year. So as most of our working group members know, this is our opportunity to really set that work plan for the new year and provide that update. So. And here you can kind of see the change from the beginning of last year to the end. And again, we have some new projects we're bringing on board in categories B, C, and D for 8 total recommendations beyond what we were looking at last year. So we did have a very productive year during 2021. So jumping into category A. A7. Looking at the feasibility of widening or adding through lanes on Plantation Road between 24 and Cedar Grove Road and Postal Lane. This is one of our efforts that is on hold pending the results of the Mulberry Knoll Road Extension Study. And that study is expected to be completed this spring. So we hope to come back to you with more on that later this spring once we know the outcome of that effort. And that is it for A. So the rest of the A recommendations, the other 6 are all in progress with no substantive updates, as you'll see in your spreadsheet. So moving on to category B and recommendation B2, considering modifications to the land development requirements and or DelDOT's development coordination manual to require additional buffers or setbacks for all new developments for future road expansion. So some updates here. In 2020, the Sussex County Planning and Zoning Commission did discuss a potential future revision to the zoning code, which would clarify how much parking may be permitted in the front yard setback. So obviously, when you have parking in front of new development, that precludes future road widening. So that conversation has been introduced at the county level. Other changes relevant to this recommendation, we heard last January actually that the development coordination manual was updated at the end of 2019 to require a larger width along 2-lane principal arterials. Just keep in mind though that of all our east-west routes in Sussex County, only 18404 is a principal arterial. So that change to the DCM would really only apply in a pretty limited circumstance, since the rest of the roads east-west are minor arterials or collectors. Changing the right-of-way requirements for other road classifications that are not principal arterials would require another update to the DCM. Regarding those updates, DelDOT is currently updating Chapter 2 of the DCM, which relates to traffic studies, and the Chapter 3, which deals with the right-of-way, is not yet underway. So that is coming. DelDOT will be looking at Chapter 3, but they're not there just yet. Also wanted to let you know that the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, also one of the strategies of that document, recommends revisions to the DCM to require additional pedestrian infrastructure improvements related to new development. So we thought that would also be of interest to the group. So DelDOT is actively working on more changes to the development coordination manual. Anyone from the county want to make any comments on this point before we move on? All right.
I just have a question. This is Mike Tyler. And
Go ahead,
you
Mike.
have pedestrian. You mentioned a pedestrian, but what about cycling for the developments? You know, I noticed in some developments they do have bike lanes and things like that. Are we going to be asking them to do that as well?
Leah, do you know, or
Pam came on.
Pam,
oh,
hi.
okay, I didn't see you, Pam.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yes, for the developments, the requirement of a shared use path is determined whether it's in a particular investment level, as guided by our state, our Office of State Planning, and it depends on the number of trips that the development generates. So based on those criteria, we let the developers know whether or not they need to build a shared use path along their frontage roadway.
Great, thanks, Pam.
Sure.
Hey, Leah, back to you.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, moving on to recommendation B5, study the feasibility of converting the Arby's driveway between Route 1 and Savannah Road into a publicly accessible road. So we had actually some interesting updates on this one this year. So DelDOT did negotiate a concept for connections through that Nicola Pizza property, and Sussex County approved that site plan with the easement language. However, progress on this is on hold until Arby's comes up for redevelopment. And in the meantime, traffic conditions will be monitored during the Old Orchard Road realignment construction. So we'll keep an eye on things, but that is on hold until Arby's comes through.
Keep going, Leah. Let's finish category B and then we'll come back to Bob.
Sounds good. Recommendation B8, looking at the feasibility of a parking management system to alert travelers when parking lots at major destinations are full. So you may recall we discussed this last year. This largely is in consideration, especially of folks traveling down south to go to Cape Henlopen and to the beach, and they get all the way there and realize the parking lot's full. So BenRec is getting ready to update their entrance to the state park and are very interested in exploring adding automated counters for use on tracking parking occupancy. So they are in coordination with DelDOT on that. So hopefully more to come on that this year. Recommendation B10, endorse don't block the box legislation with camera enforcement. This is one of the items that will be initiated this year. Currently, local legislators and DelDOT are drafting that legislation. So more on that to come as well. Recommendation B14. We obviously heard a lot about this from Mike a little bit earlier. And at the April meeting, we hope to hear a little bit more from you about where there are some desired locations for tree plantings. Mary provided us a little bit of an update of where the Byway Committee has been working in this space. So more conversation on that in April. That'll be everyone's homework assignment.
That completes the update on category B. Bob, did you have something you want to, a point you want to make? And if anyone else wanted to come on and talk about any of those updates to category B.
I have a question about, I think it was B5, the Arby's Road. Yeah, on further progress on hold until Arby's comes up for development. Is that an indefinite hold, or do they have a timeline or a requirement or a schedule? Because this was I believe I was the original suggester for this one, although there were other people interested in it. And I would like to keep people who are interested in this, and I know at least one very interested in it. I'd like to keep them apprised of what the schedule is. So whenever I see a progress on hold with an indefinite, I try to definitize when the on hold is going to be released.
So I'm happy to chime in on that from the DelDOT perspective. So Bob, we're not planning to move this forward as a project really until Arby's decides to do some redevelopment. And the reason why is because making this connection is going to require an entire redesign of their current site. The parking that exists on if you're looking from Route 1 towards Savannah Road, the parking that's on the right side has got to go away if we make that connection. Their drive-through location is really not going to work. So it's really a bigger effort, and we're going to need them to kind of come up for a redevelopment proposal to be able to make all of this work. So we're not losing sight of it, but it's not something that we're going to push forward with until they really have a development plan for their site.
Jamie, did you want, hold on, Bob. Jamie, did you want to add something to that?
Sure, I can, Bob. Good evening. Jamie Whitehurst here, Sussex County Planning and Zoning. Just to add the comment that the easement language is permanent. So we've achieved the commercial interconnectivity from east-west across one parcel. So we're 50% of the way there. But we're waiting for Arby's to come forward with a specific proposal, and we have no indications on when that might be. But we're 50% of the way to achieving the objective. So,
thanks, Jamie.
As far as funding the expense to make changes that Arby's would be constrained or driven by DelDOT policies or guidelines, is there any possibility that there could be sort of a shared expense? And in fact, other people who would take advantage of that I can't talk for them, but if it's money that's holding things up, if there were a plan on how to do it and some idea of what it would cost, then perhaps the hat could be passed and decide how to cut up the expense so that Arby's didn't have to absorb the entire amount. But that's just a thought. I would like to see that done, and I know lots of people would, since it fits in so nicely with existing roads and stoplights. But when I see further progress on hold until indefinite, that concerns me because it's basically dead stopped until otherwise, moved along. Thank you.
Okay, great. So Bob, if you and Jamie could both lower your hand, that'd be great, just so your friendly facilitator doesn't get confused here. So we're going to go on to category C and have Leah continue. I did want to just one quick kind of, I don't even think it's a clarification, but just to be consistent. So when we talk about something being in progress items will be complete at some point. When we refer to it as ongoing, an ongoing item is part of a normal procedure on a continuing basis. So it's something that can never really be finished. It's kind of always sort of being worked on, monitored, and so forth. So we had referenced that in the beginning. I just wanted to clarify that. But Leah, if you could go on to category C. And again, we'll wait till the end of category C to take questions and comments.
And thanks, Andrew, for that clarification. I do appreciate it. So recommendation C1, conduct a corridor study on Route 9 to determine the feasibility of widening to 4 lanes. So there's currently a project programmed in the FY21-26 CTP. That project development process did begin in October 2021. So that's underway. The Plantation Road project will complete the widening of Route 9 between Ward Avenue and Route 1. C2, also relating to Route 9. This is for a study at Route 9 and minus Conaway to determine if a traffic signal is warranted, and if so, install a signal. Now that study is complete and a traffic signal was not warranted. However, the study did result in the recommendation of a southbound right turn lane. So that was a recommendation coming out of that, but keeping a stop sign there. The project was programmed into the FY21-26 CTP, but that right turn lane was accelerated thanks to maintenance division by adding it to a paving and rehabilitation project. So construction on that is underway. Recommendation C4, improving the Canary Creek Bridge on New Road to reduce flooding. So that project is also underway under the DelDOT's Bridges State of Good Repair budget. Online public information meetings were held in June and August this past summer, and final right-of-way approval has been received. And we do anticipate that construction will begin fall of 2023, as opposed to after the completion of Old Orchard Road as originally planned. C5, improve the intersection of Cave Neck Road, Sweetbriar Road, and Hudson Road. That project is also programmed in the FY21 CTP. DelDOT did present alternatives to council in this past November. A public workshop was also held on November 16th, and a preferred alternative is scheduled to be selected early this year. And then based on that preferred alternative, design should be complete by early 2024. Recommendation of C6. This one's a little bit broader. looking at the feasibility of lengthening left and right turn lanes throughout the study area. So DelDOT Traffic already ran with this one, evaluating locations suggested by you all, and all but 2 of those recommendations have been incorporated into other projects. Currently, DelDOT is looking at the potential to add a southbound left turn lane off of Route 1 at Dartmouth Drive to the Kings Highway Capital Project. So more to come on the outcome of that. Other locations include southbound Route 1 at Ames Drive, which will be reevaluated after the Holland Glade Road project is complete, once we understand better how traffic's moving through the area at that time. Design is currently underway on southbound Route 1 at Old Landing Road. Lastly, pavement rehabilitation project under construction at Minos Conway is also adding the right turn lane at Route 9. So lots moving forward there. So also Minos Conway, look at the feasibility of improving other road features, including lane widths, shoulder widths, turn lanes, which we just discussed, and curvature. So DelDOT did complete a curve compliance study in February 2019, and those signage improvements were implemented in March of the same year. The Henlopen TID study, if y'all recall the presentation you received a year ago from Sarah, that recommended a project to improve the roadway. That project is not currently funded. However, as previously discussed, the paving project is adding that right turn lane. Further action on this road is on hold, waiting for Bob's ears to perk up again, but pending completion of the Minos Conway grade separated interchange. So again, we really want to wait and see how traffic behaves and how the new grade separated intersection works before we take a look at any further improvements there.
Mike, I'm just going to have Leah finish category C, and then I'll come on and recognize your question, okay?
Okay. Sure.
C11, develop concepts and estimates for bringing roads in the study area to DelDOT standard, including shoulders. This is a little bit similar to what we just talked about on Minos Conway, but this was clarified as only applying to state roads in the 5 Points area. The Henlopen TID study did address state maintained roads west of SR1 and looked at estimates for bringing them up to snuff with the DelDOT standard, 11-foot road lanes, and shoulders. Roadways east of Route 1 are already in the CTP or being studied by other efforts. So we are considering the status of this recommendation complete. So again, this does not mean that all those improvements have been made, but it does mean that pretty much all of the roads that would fall under this recommendation have concepts or estimates prepared, and they have entered into the DelDOT process. So one we can check off the list this year. Very exciting. Recommendation C12, study access management opportunities along Route 1, including potential connections between businesses. Another piece of exciting news, an agreement between Lowe's and DelDOT has been executed that will provide access to Lowe's from Route 1 through the Lewis Transit Center property. So that's a big one that been fighting for a while now. Yeah, I see some, yes, bravo. Thank you, Speaker Schwarzkopf. Sussex County also is actively pursuing interconnectivity along all the commercial properties along Route 1. So, we talked about Arby's already. Lowe's is a great example of a win here. So again, as Andrew's clarified earlier, this recommendation status is ongoing. So this isn't something we're ever going to be able to check off the boxes complete, because the county and DelDOT are always going to be looking for ways to better manage access along Route 1. So as more projects come online, I'm sure we will be providing more updates for this recommendation. C14, feasibility of installing a Your Speed display on southbound Route 1 at Nassau Road. Here's another win. Radar speed sign was installed in August, about 400 feet, 15 feet south of Nassau Road. So we are considering this one complete. And last one for category C, C16, look at the feasibility of providing driveway access from Beacon Middle School and Love Creek Elementary School onto Mulberry Knoll Road. So this is one we plan on initiating this year. DelDOT and the project team here will be revisiting the reasons behind the original school site access plans and why that connection was not provided at the time the schools were developed. And of course, we will be doing that in consultation with Cape Henlopen School District. So more to come on this initiative this coming year.
All right, great, Leah. Mike, thanks for your patience. Come on and ask your question.
Yeah, a couple questions. One is on the Minos Conaway Road. You're going to widen the Route 9 access, I guess, to Minos Conaway. That's a popular road that a lot of us cyclists use because it has a nice wide shoulder. I just want you to remain cognizant of that fact and allow for cyclists. One of the things that happens is when that kind of thing happens, they put the rumble strips, they redo the rumble strips in the wrong place and they make them too wide. We want you to keep using those narrow rumble strips, but also you need to have some kind of a sign that says reduce speed or yield to cyclists in the lane, because we use that road. It's quite popular by a lot of cyclists in the area. The other question I had, and this has happened when I was involved with Citizens Coalition years ago, we talked about the interconnectivity. And I can't understand why Grotto's Pizza and Home Depot aren't interconnected. A lot of people from Grotto's say, okay, let's go to Home Depot. They got to go out to Route 1 and back on to get into Home Depot. So I would like you to look at a lot of those places because there's so much opportunity to have interconnectivity, but it hasn't happened. And I think there's no reason why Grotto's can't have a driveway that cuts across and allows cars to go to the Home Depot and vice versa. That's all.
Shantae, do you want to respond to that?
Sure, I just wanted to talk a little bit about interconnectivity. Mike, great point. We definitely, I think, have missed opportunities along the way to do some interconnections, but just also wanted to share that there is a need for willingness on the commercial entities, side of things. So we don't just go in and say we're doing this interconnectivity. There really has to be, their willingness to do it. And so we're trying where we can, especially with the new development proposals. And as you saw that Leah talked about, with Lowe's, we were able to kind of make something work for them. So we're trying to do it in a stepwise fashion, but it does require that willingness of these entities to make it happen.
Great, thanks, Shantae. Kim, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just want to say, Mike, the county's working as hard as we can on this one. As far as the Planning Commission goes, all the new developments that come in that are commercial, we say, where's your site for interconnectivity? Even if they don't have commercial around them, I'm like, in the future, I want to know where that's going to be. So we're trying to plan ahead. We just wanted you to know that this is, we're doing what we can, man.
Well, that's great. And again, part of the role of this working group is to provide, whether it's the state or the county, that support. And again, this is just Mike. This is not the whole working group uniformly endorsing it, but you're hearing at least one person saying that they want to see that. And hopefully that helps you, Kim, as you try to do your work on the county side, and Shantae as she and her colleagues try to do that work on the state side. So we're going to move along to our category D at this point. And bring it back to Leah.
Thanks, Andrew. So switching modes to different modes. So again, category D relates to alternatives to driving, walking, biking, and transit. And Anne Marie, I see you came up. So would you like to take us away for this one and give us a little update on the status of a hop-on, hop-off service in Lewis?
Sure. So this is something that has been talked about for a long time, and we have two of our council people have made it a high priority, and it was ultimately prioritized by our city council as something that they want to do in 2022. So we've been doing a lot of legwork. We've been interacting with DTC, and we are looking to lease some of the retired paratransit buses. We are calling it a pilot program because, again, this is uncharted waters for us. So we're trying to move into it in a very mindful way. So we are looking at a loop that we would run. At this point, we believe we would run 2 buses, and the stops would include the ferry, our beach parking lots, Otis Smith Park, which is near the Beacon Motel, 1812 parking lot, which is downtown, and the Canal Front Park parking lot, which is also downtown. And then we'd go out to the George H.P. Smith Park, which is where the farmers market is on Saturdays. And then down in through town and over to Schley Avenue, which is kind of like a satellite parking lot for downtown. So we're hoping that we might be able to get more people to park there and use the transit rather than, parking all in town. And then it would go to the library and Trailhead, and then Cape Henlopen High School. So we're working with Cape Henlopen High School to get agreement to have that kind of as a park and ride location for us. So we've been working on it. There's still a lot of details to work out, but we feel like we're making pretty good progress. And I think the availability of the retired paratransit buses allows us to do it without having to front major expense on large buses that would be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to make it work. So we're optimistic. It's not 100% yet. We will be talking about this during our budget process. As anybody knows with transit, it costs more than you bring in your revenue, but we do believe that this is something that will relieve both parking congestion and traffic congestion and provide a service for the people both living in and visiting Lewis.
Thank you. Very exciting. And we look forward to hearing how that rollout goes this spring. Okay. Recommendation D3, develop design guidance to separate pedestrians and bicyclists from highway traffic using aesthetic treatments. So this is another recommendation that will be initiated in this year in conjunction with the SR1 low stress bikeway study, which I know we have talked about before, and will also be a study that is addressing some of the other recommendations coming up momentarily. Recommendation D4, developed concepts and estimates for filling sidewalk gaps along New Road and Old Orchard Road. So a number of these gaps are going to be addressed by current CTP projects, including Old Orchard Road, the New Road Canary Creek Bridge project, which we discussed a little bit earlier, minus Conway, and New Road between Nassau Road and Old Orchard Road. So you can see the dates there on the screen. That's kind of going to be coming through in the upcoming years. Other portions of sidewalk gaps, of course, will be built by developer projects. We know the Byway Committee will also be identifying some remaining gaps on New Road, and Dell will be working on inventorying remaining gaps on Old Orchard Road in FY23. So if the next screen here has a map, and this shows some of those projects in yellow. This just includes Dell CTP projects. It does not include private development projects, but just to get a sense for new sidewalks or paths that will be coming online in the coming years. Again, you do have a copy of this map in your meeting materials if you need to study it further. And recommendation D5, again, also sidewalk gaps, this time are along Savannah Road between Lewis and 5 Points. So As many of you know, the Savannah Road Sidewalk project started construction in just this past November, which is a new sidewalk on the south side of Savannah Road between Quaker Road and the Georgetown Lewis Trail. Also, Old Orchard Road project will be touching that sidewalk on Savannah Road in the project limits, as shown on the map. And again, we will be inventorying those remaining gaps and addressing them. So one more map here showing some more of those connectivities a little bit easier to see, more zoomed in. So lots of feet of sidewalks and pathways coming soon. Really will help build out the bike and pedestrian network. So recommendation D9, identify potential connections to and from the Lewis Transit Center. So jumping back over to the other side of Route 1. Those connections will also be examined as part of that low stress bikeway study I mentioned a little bit ago. Also, the draft FY23 CTP does have a project on Shady Road that includes bicycle and pedestrian improvements. So more to come on that, pending, of course, the approval of the CTP. Okay, I think we're almost through D here, and then we can get some of your questions. So D11, another feasibility recommendation that we are considering complete, and that is to look at the feasibility of providing shelters at bus stops. As many of you probably have noticed, DTC has upgraded and improved a number of transit shelters in the study area with the new statewide shelter, which is that kind of a lot of clear glass. And DTC will continue evaluating bus stops for shelters under their policies for doing so. So we are considering this one complete based on those recent improvements. Okay, moving a little further south, opportunities for pedestrian crossings on Kings Highway and Freeman Highway. So recently pedestrian crossings have been provided at the signal with Clay Road. And we have some additional improvements coming online in 2022 at Gills Neck Road. Additionally, there's an agreement between a developer, the city of Lewis, and DelDOT for another new signal at Freeman Highway and Monroe Avenue. And that also will have at least one crosswalk across Freeman Highway. I have another slide on this one because there's a lot going on. May have some additional facilities included with the Kings Highway CTP project. And that will be incorporating some of the recommendations made by the Kings Highway Gills Neck Road Byway Master Plan. I'm sure if anyone has more questions, Mary could speak to those. That CTP project has started and a public meeting is planned for February of this year. So that's tomorrow. Very exciting. That's coming up very soon. One last thing, and that is RFBs are now operating at the trail crossing of Freeman's Highway near Cape Henlopen Drive. So Mary, I don't know if you want to share anything else with the group on all the great work that the Byway Committee has been up to in the vicinity of Kings Highway.
No, I think you're good. We learned today, actually, there should be a public meeting, as you mentioned, somewhere near the end of February on the design for the CTP project for Kings Highway. So we're all very excited to see what that looks like. And it's been a long time coming. So we're looking forward to it.
Mike, you had your hand raised. Did you want to jump in?
Yeah, the one question I had about New Road, 25 years ago, I had no problem riding on New Road. Now I wouldn't ride on the New Road because it's so narrow and a lot of cars go really fast. Will there be any opportunities for a bike lane on New Road from the highway or from Nassau all the way to Pilottown Road? That's the one question I have. And then there's another one about Shady Road. How are you going to match? There can't be too many bicycles riding on Shady Road because you can't cross. I used to be able to cross Route 1 from that road, but you can't do that unless you want people to ride on Route 1. So I don't know what the plan is for Shady Road. So if you could explain that and tell me what's up. Thank you.
So Leah, I'm happy to help with the new road answer if you would like.
Yeah, please do, Mary. I think you probably have the latest, greatest information there.
So we don't have a lot of information between Mike. We don't have a lot of information between Nassau and Old Orchard. Right now, the access there for bikes is probably best served on the Georgetown to Lewis Trail. The development of Tower Hill has a shared use path from just after New Road to Schaefer Lane. When you get to Schaefer Lane, you cross New Road. Then you have the new development of Lewis Waterfront Preserve that has a bike lane, a shared use path that takes you over the new Canary Creek Bridge. There's been some changes in what that looks like and whether that shared use path continues from the Canary Creek Bridge all the way up to Captain's Circle, which is at Reserve at Pilot Town, or whether it crosses New Road again, goes up a bit and crosses back. And then the ultimate goal is to get you into the Reserve at Pilot Town, which are low stress bike streets, put you on 4th Street and into town, because there just is never going to be enough space between 4th Street and Pilot Town to get a bike lane or anything else in there. So the goal right now is to get folks to the Reserve at Pilot Town and on to low stress bikeways into town.
Okay.
Great. Thanks, Mary.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions regarding category D before we wrap up the implementation plan update with category E?
Andrew, it's Jen. I just wanted to real quick reply to Mike in regards to Shady Road. It has been submitted to the CTP, but still the CTP is still in draft form. Mike, that was more related to our transit center and pedestrian access, but I'll be more than happy to talk more with you about that if you need it.
Hey, I understand. Thank you.
Speaker Schwarzkopf.
I just want to ask something about the bus shelters on Route 1. I was a little confused. You said that you were still looking at a couple, or unsure which way to go, but then you were closing out that category. Are there more bus shelters that we need on Route 1? If so, I'll pay for them if you want to put them up there. So just get back to me, let me know. All right. I'm not going to pay out of my personal account. No, if anybody's listening, it's coming out of community transportation funds.
Okay.
Speaker, I think that we have included all of the bus shelters that we just discussed previously, but if there are other locations where we think they're needed, we'd be happy to coordinate with you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that generous offer. Okay, why don't we move on to category E? I still see Mike Tyler and Speaker Schwarzkopf's hands raised, but I think we've already responded to them, so they can take their hands down. Leah, why don't you go on with category E?
Thanks, Andrew. The last category for the evening, very exciting. E2. So again, category E is bigger new transportation infrastructure projects. So to that end, E2, evaluate the potential transportation benefits, costs, and impacts of a new road parallel to Plantation Road connecting Mulberry Knoll Road to Route 9. And as part of that, require any new development in this area to build this road to state spec, one parcel at a time. So this is another project that's a candidate for the FY23 CTP, and hearings were held in September. However, it is still intended that developers would build this road to the greatest extent possible or contribute to its construction via the Henlopen TID. And related, a public workshop was held for this in October, and also that study will be completed spring of this year. That's for Mulberry Knoll. So more to come on this also. Recommendation E4, evaluate the potential transportation benefits, costs, and impacts of a new road connecting Route 1 north of 5 Points and the Vineyards. This is another recommendation that will be initiated this year. That new road connection would allow developments in the area to access the network from more than just one point. So that is a known bottleneck, as all of you know, and that will be spending a little bit more time on this in the coming year. And last one for category E. Again, evaluate the potential transportation benefits, costs, and impacts of a new road connecting Postal Lane with the intersection of Old Landing Road, Airport Road. So an airport road extension between Old Landing and SR 24 is currently is a CTP project, and preliminary engineering for that will begin in 2025. So that is in the pipeline. That new extension from Old Landing Road will connect to BB Drive, which connects to 24. The other part of that, though, between Airport Road west of 24 to Postal Lane, does not have a project at this time, although it is recommended by the Henlopen TID study. So part of that moving forward, and part of that, again, is not a project at this time. Okay.
All right, great job, Leah. That was very comprehensive and I think was really informative. Mike, I see your hand up. I wasn't sure if you put it down and then it went back up, or obviously if you have a question, come on. If not, yep. Okay, I thought that was an error. Okay, does anyone have any questions or comments about our category yellow, our E category? Okay, Shante, did you want to come on? Well, I see Bob came on. Yes, Bob.
Yeah, I blew it when we were talking about category C, which, as I recall, was making the best of the existing infrastructure. That I have that right, correct? That was category C.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I know we've talked about how Dell makes continuous improvements to the signaling structure, the type of signals, the connectivity between the signals, and to the to the central controller up in Smyrna. But I haven't heard anything lately. What I would like to see would be if Dell is doing projections of how signaling improvements over the next 5 years, let's say, will improve the average transit time between 5 points and south of the, let's say to the canal, at all 5 levels of traffic, from the best flow to the worst flow, which is, basically chock-a-block, whether they look at it that way or not. That's basically making the most of the roadway in various traffic conditions by making signaling improvements, or that includes surveillance improvements of the actual traffic there. Is maybe that could be put on the agenda for a future working group. Am I off base here, or does anybody else wonder, how bad is next summer going to be in terms of traffic through the 5 Points area, south to Dewey Beach, or at least south to the canal?
Yeah, I would say that the traffic signal improvements that are made and pretty much constantly being evaluated, one of the benefits of having that connectivity and the increased technology associated with it is that Dell can make those real-time adjustments when those issues occur. To answer your question, I don't believe that there are current activities evaluating the projection of traffic in the future. I think that's part of what makes the technology more useful and more efficient, because they can do real-time evaluations and look at situations that occur, whether they're related to seasonal or non-seasonal traffic, construction, lane closures, or possibly a crash or other incident. So we can follow up and see and provide examples on how that real-time adjustment can improve situations. But we'll also confirm that those projected improvements aren't necessarily being evaluated for the purpose of the signal timing. Obviously, for other capacity improvements like widening and things of that nature, we would certainly use projections to determine how those improvements would work.
All right, well, I'll change my request then. I'd be happy to have you report the as-builts as you actually make changes into the signaling on a year-to-year basis. And since you're monitoring that, you can just show the effectiveness of your improvements as they occur. I mean, to be honest, real data is always better than projected data. So as long as you report, periodic, I don't know how long this working group is going. I think it's a fantastic idea that Dell made, institute, and I hope they continue it as long as it seems productive. But that, to me, since we really would like to expedite traffic flow on Route 1 as much as possible while we're doing all these other things, so we don't need that double-decker road that is so expensive that I love so much and nobody else does. But at least we know that Dell is making improvements on traffic flow north and south on 1, and we can brag about it. Thanks a lot.
Sure.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Okay, anything else? I saw Speaker Schwarzkopf come on, but then went off, so I'm going to assume that he didn't want to make any further comments. So I'm going to go to next steps. As you can see, we're going to continue to work on the recommendations. We as we did tonight with the roundabout discussion, we tried to incorporate other points of interest into our working group meetings, but we don't want anyone ever to think that the focus of this group ever stops being the implementation plan, those 78 recommendations, working through each of them, providing updates. A lot of work goes into that, as you can see. These are not easy efforts to initiate, and they're not easy to complete, but a lot of progress has been made, and we will continue to work on those recommendations. We'll provide email progress updates in February and March. We will convene the working group again in April, the last Monday of April, April 25th. This is always the busy time from a process standpoint. It's always busy in terms of the work we're doing on the recommendations, but we're going to have the working group meeting at the end of April. We're going to be preparing our 2021 annual report. So this is everything that was done in 2021. We'll report on this spring, and then we'll have our annual public workshop sometime in May. So this sort of fits the normal schedule that you all should be used to at this point. So I did not receive, we did get a couple of questions from the public, but we did respond to those. But I haven't seen anyone asked to make a public comment from the members of the public. So we're going to move on and wrap up the meeting by just thanking everyone. Again, you see the next meeting. Again, I'll give one more opportunity for everyone to, if they have a question or something that they are unsure of. But certainly, if there's someone who hasn't had an opportunity to ask a question or make a comment, we would take that at this point.
Andrew, we just got one in.
Yep, I see that. So I'm going to read this in real time, and hopefully members of my team are reading it as well. But Ely wrote the safety comparison between the traffic. This is a little long, so everyone will just have to bear with me. The safety comparison between the traffic signal intersection and the roundabouts is strange to the public because the new roundabouts are not replacing signaled intersections. Instead, the roundabouts are placed where the traffic flows without pause, except the residents in the new subdivisions in the area would have a hard time getting in and out of the communities. And then a second point, the roundabout on Beaver Dam Road, which is slide 16, seems to go into the new subdivision. It almost looks like a straight road. When the visibility is low, cars may proceed straight and run into oncoming cars. So I know that was more of a comment, not necessarily a question. And we thank you for that. If someone on the team wanted to respond, we certainly can. But if not, we will review this and report back through one of our ways, either through an email
Andrew, I'm
update.
happy to respond.
Okay, good. Thanks, Shantae.
In terms of, so the locations where we're putting roundabouts, those intersections would be eligible for a traffic signal. So they would meet the traffic signal warrant. So we are looking at it and saying, does it make sense to put a traffic signal there, or does it make sense to put a roundabout there? So when we move down to your example of the roundabout at Beaver Dam Road, the amount of traffic generated by that development would have potentially required a traffic signal. So instead of putting a traffic signal on Beaver Dam Road where there are none in that area, we said, let's put a roundabout in. And it can be either the existing traffic generated by that development along with existing traffic on the road, or those future 20 to 30 year projections that we look at. So we're looking at the long-term solution. In terms of the roundabout at Beaver Dam, it is offset to the right, if you will, if you're going towards Lewis. Part of that, so as part of the roundabout design, and Todd can talk about it a little bit, you are trying to deflect vehicles, which makes them to slow down. So that's part of, and I think Leah talked about it during her roundabout presentation. And so there is some of that deflection to make sure that people are slowing down as they're entering the roundabout. There is temporary lighting at the roundabout right now, and there will be permanent lighting with regular light fixtures being installed. So in terms of visibility being low, it will be lit at night, and there's appropriate signage, warning signage telling you that you're coming up to a roundabout, as well as signage once you get to the roundabout to let you know that you need to slow down and make different movements.
Todd, did you want to add something?
No, I just wanted to reiterate, Shantae spoke beautifully about it. It's basically intended to help redirect traffic so it's not a straight route, to slow them down as they deflect into the roundabout. So the intent is to help avoid those potential head-on collisions and what is typically referred to as a fastest path analysis in terms of what would be the fastest potential movement through a roundabout at any given point to ensure that the geometry is not set up to allow for anything faster than a certain speed.
Great. Thanks, Todd. And another comment came in by Ely that said the single lane roundabouts preclude future expansion to accommodate volume increase. Where there is an explosive growth of population, the roundabouts may create bottlenecks sooner than later. A roundabout at the intersection of Jollins Way and Route 24 makes no sense because Route 24 is already backed up. Again, a comment, we don't have to respond, but if someone does have a response, feel free to jump in.
So I would say yes, roundabouts, single lane roundabouts do have capacity limits just as a signalized intersection does. So once you get to those capacity limits, there's one of two things to do. You either create a multi-lane roundabout to replace that single lane, or in some cases, you may need to take out the roundabout in 20 years, let's say, and put in a signalized intersection. So that happens really regardless of the intersection control type. We have to make modifications over time to intersections to accommodate future growth. And so we, as I mentioned before, we are looking at either 20 or 30 year projections in terms of traffic volumes when we're making these decisions. So it's not a short-sighted decision that we're making. In terms of a roundabout at the intersection of Jollins Way and 24, I'm not aware of it. I don't know if Pam has any information. I'd have to talk a little bit more with our development coordination team because I'm not aware of any roundabouts being proposed on Route 24 due to those capacity issues. So we can get back to you about that specific question.
Mike
Yes,
Toller,
thank you, Shantae.
Oh.
I did note that down. I don't know anything offhand, but I can get that information and circle it back so we can get that to you.
Thanks, Pam. Sorry, I didn't see you come on camera there.
No problem.
Mike Toller, I see your hands raised. Did you want to add to this discussion?
Well, the only thing that, as a cyclist, that I fear about roundabouts, no matter how fast people are going, is cars do not like to yield to cyclists going around the roundabout. I've been cut off a couple of times by cars coming right in with me and closer than I want them to be. And I would hope maybe some signage or something like that to at least make them aware that cyclists also use these roundabouts, because we can go around the roundabout almost as fast as a car can. And that's good and bad. So it's just a concern that I have about all the roundabouts. And even with the new roads that we're putting in, I'm hoping that we're having bicycle lanes on all these new roads rather than just make another road that's hard to ride on. Okay, that's all I had to say.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to wrap us up here. Been a great meeting. You can see on this slide, our next meeting is Monday, April 25th. You can also see on here that if you have any questions, you can email our project rockstar, Jensen Ellie Miller. Her email's on here, her phone number's on here. You already have all that, but feel free to touch base with her. And, again, it goes without saying, but that's why I'm going to say it. This process has been successful and will continue to be successful because of your commitment and your energy. And we thank all of you for showing up and participating, listening, sharing back to your constituents. And like I said, we have a busy spring coming up with the annual report, the working group meeting, and the workshop. We hope that you will participate in all that. And so on behalf of the entire project team, I thank you. And we will close out our meeting.